There is a man inside the structure of Rome who has been saying, quietly and then not so quietly, that something has gone wrong. Not a rebel, not a schismatic, a bishop in full canonical standing, consecrated, recognized, obedient, in every formal sense, who nonetheless looks at the society of St. Pius X and says, "These men are not your enemies." His name is Athanasius Schneider. And 13 days from now, on the 1st of July, the world will find out whether anyone in the Vatican was listening. If this kind of hidden story matters to you, the kind that never makes the mainstream headlines but shapes the future of the Church, stay close. There is much more ahead on this channel. Athanasius Schneider was born in 1961 in the Soviet Union, in a German Catholic community that had been deported to Kazakhstan under Stalin. He grew up in a world where the Mass was forbidden, where priests came in secret, where the faith was passed in whispers and at enormous personal cost. His mother catechized him in hiding. The sacraments reached his family the way contraband reaches a prison, carefully, dangerously, with the full weight of love behind every act. That childhood did something to him. It gave him a category that most bishops in the comfortable West have never needed, the category of a faith worth suffering for. When Schneider looks at men who have stood outside Rome's structures for decades, rather than surrender what they believe is sacred, he does not see disobedience. He sees something he recognizes. He entered religious life, joined the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross, was ordained a priest, earned a doctorate in patristics, the study of the early Church Fathers, and was eventually consecrated a bishop. Since 2011, he has served as auxiliary bishop of St. Mary in Astana, Kazakhstan. He holds no great curial post. He commands no army of followers. He is, in the administrative sense, a minor figure. And yet his words travel farther than those of cardinals. He has written books. He has given interviews that circulate for years after publication. He has spoken in Rome and in Warsaw, and in Vienna, and in the United States, always with the same essential message. The Catholic Church is in a grave crisis. The crisis has liturgical roots, and the men who refuse to abandon the ancient rite are not the cause of the crisis. They are a symptom of it, and in some ways a witness against it. His most sustained engagement with the Society of St. Pius X began, in a formal sense, in 2015, when Pope Francis asked him and 3 other bishops to visit SSPX houses and seminaries. Schneider accepted. He spent days living with them, in their seminaries, in their priories, in the rhythm of their daily life. He prayed their Mass. He spoke with their priests and seminarians. He came away with a conclusion that surprised some observers and infuriated others. He said the SSPX professes the Catholic faith, not approximately, not mostly, not with regrettable reservations. He said their declaration of faith is, in his precise phrasing, clearly Catholic, and that any Catholic who reads it must, if they are honest, accept it. He said their theological objections to certain texts of the Second Vatican Council represent not rebellion, but what he called a constructive contribution to a more mature understanding of difficult questions: religious liberty, ecumenism, the nature of collegiality, the liturgical reform. This is extraordinary language from a sitting bishop inside Rome's canonical structures. He is not saying the SSPX is right about everything. He is saying they are raising real questions that the Church has not honestly answered. On the question of the traditional Mass itself, Schneider has been equally direct over many years. He has described the liturgical reform of Paul VI as an act of true revolution. His words, noting that Paul VI was the first pope in 2,000 years to fundamentally restructure the Roman Rite. Schneider does not use the word revolution approvingly. He uses it descriptively, and the description carries its own weight. Revolutions, in his framework, are events that break continuity. And continuity, for Schneider, is not a preference. It is the spine of Catholic identity. He has called for the traditional Mass to be made available in every Catholic seminary, arguing that priests who cannot celebrate it are cut off from 12 centuries of the Church's liturgical inheritance. He has spoken of Catholics who attend only the traditional Mass as being in a kind of liturgical exile, a phrase that implies they have been displaced from their own home rather than choosing an eccentric preference. All of this forms the background against which his February 2026 intervention must be understood. Earlier this year, the the Society of St. Pius X announced that it would consecrate new bishops on the 1st of July at its founding seminary in Econi, Switzerland. The announcement sent a tremor through the Church. The memory of 1988 is long. It was at Econi, on the 30th of June of that year, that Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre consecrated 4 bishops without the mandate of Pope John Paul II. John Paul responded with a declaration of excommunication. The wound is never fully healed. Now Econi again. Now another set of consecrations. Now another reckoning. Rome's response was swift and severe in tone. The Vatican warned publicly that proceeding without a papal mandate would constitute what it called a schismatic act and would carry the automatic penalty of excommunication. Pope Leo XIV, in a statement reported on the 16th of June, said he had invited the SSPX to stand down, that he was considering a further personal appeal, but that ultimately it was their choice, and that if they made it, he was sorry, but the Church must move forward. Those are not the words of a man who expects a last-minute reconciliation. Into this gathering storm, Bishop Schneider inserted himself with a directness that was, even for him, remarkable. In February of 2026, he published what has been described as an exclusive appeal to Pope Leo XIV. Its argument was structured, and its language was deliberate. He urged the Pope to grant the apostolic mandate that would make the July consecrations legitimate rather than illicit. His reasoning moved on several levels. First, the historical level. Schneider argued that the requirement of papal consent for episcopal consecrations is a relatively recent canonical development, not a feature of the Church's ancient tradition. In the patristic era, the age of the Fathers, he spent his doctoral years studying. Bishops were consecrated by other bishops without the specific authorization of Rome as a formal precondition. He was careful here. He was not arguing that the current law is wrong, but that its violation should not too quickly be equated with schism. The distinction matters. A schismatic ruptures communion with the Church. A disobedient son remains within the family, even when he acts against the father's wishes. Second, the doctrinal level. He pointed out that the SSPX's profession of faith follows the same Tridentine formula used by the Fathers of the Second Vatican Council itself. The profession they make is the profession that built the Council. On what grounds, Schneider asked, should that profession now be considered insufficient for canonical recognition? The Holy See, in his analysis, was requiring the Society to accept certain formulations of non-definitive pastoral conciliar documents as a condition for regularization. Formulations that remain contested even among loyal and obedient theologians. He was clear that pastoral declarations, unlike dogmatic definitions, can be revised. The Fourth Lateran Council, he noted, issued pastoral decrees that the Church later reconsidered. History is not without precedent. Third, the pastoral level. He invoked Pope Benedict XVI's expressed grief over division in the Church, his concern that the faithful not be allowed to drift further from communion. He framed the potential excommunication not as discipline but as tragedy, and he located the responsibility for that tragedy not with the Society but with Rome. That sentence is worth sitting with. A bishop in canonical standing, writing to the reigning pope, saying that if this rupture happens, Rome will bear the primary responsibility. That is not an accusation lightly made. It is the kind of statement a man makes when he believes the stakes are too high for diplomatic silence. His proposal was concrete. Regularize the SSPX canonically first. Conduct the doctrinal dialogue afterward. Do not make agreement on every contested point a precondition for allowing them back within the fold. Bring them in, and then have the conversation. The Society, he suggested, could contribute to a richer theological explication of the very texts they have questioned. Their objections, properly received, might strengthen the Church rather than wound it. Now the question is, what Pope Leo XIV will do with any of this? Leo XIV came to the papacy on the 8th of May 2025, carrying a reputation as a man of studied positions and careful language. He has shown no sign of wavering on that point. His public statements on the SSPX have been marked by what sounds like genuine sorrow rather than hostility, but also by an evident conviction that certain fundamental elements of the Church cannot be refused without consequence. The Vatican's preparations, according to reporting from sources close to the discussions, include a decree modeled on the one John Paul II issued in 1988. A formal declaration of excommunication incurred automatically, ipso facto, by those who consecrate and those who are consecrated without the papal mandate. 13 days remain. In those 13 days, Bishop Schneider's voice represents something specific and worth understanding clearly. He is not the SSPX's advocate in the sense of endorsing everything they have done or every position they hold. He is something more uncomfortable to dismiss. A bishop who has studied them from the inside, who carries the theological credentials to engage their arguments seriously, and who has concluded that the cost of losing them entirely is greater than the cost of the compromises that might keep them. He speaks not from sentiment, but from his own deep formation in the faith of the Fathers, a faith that learned to survive under Soviet persecution precisely because it did not require institutional permission to remain itself. There is a long tradition in the Church of Voices that speak from the margins of power, but from the center of memory. Athanasius of Alexandria, whose name Schneider's religious name echoes, was exiled 5 times by emperors who found his defense of Nicene orthodoxy inconvenient. The formula attributed to him, Athanasius contra mundum, Athanasius against the world, has never been used as a boast. It has been used as a description of what fidelity sometimes costs. The Athanasius of Kazakhstan has not claimed that mantle for himself. He would likely resist the comparison. But the shape of his witness, a man inside the structure, speaking truths the structure finds unwelcome, refusing to pretend the questions do not exist, has a recognizable outline for those who know their church history. Whether Pope Leo XIV hears it, whether the men at Icone pause, whether something shifts in the next 13 days, none of that is certain. The calendar moves. The dates do not change. July the 1st approaches the way a reckoning approaches, without hurry, without mercy, and without the option of remaining undecided. What is certain is that the conversation Schneider is having matters. It matters because he is having it from inside, in full view, at the cost of whatever ease would come from silence. It matters because the questions he is raising, about continuity, about the conditions for communion, about what the Church owes to those who kept an ancient fire burning when the institution tried to dim it, are not questions that excommunication decrees resolve. They are questions that outlast the decrees. The faithful who pray the old Mass in small chapels in the middle of the night, who have been doing so for decades, are not asking for vindication. They are asking for recognition. They are asking the Church to see what they kept and why they kept it, and what might have been lost if they had not. Bishop Athanasius Schneider has looked at those people and said, "I see them. I recognize what they carry, and I will say so, even in Rome." 13 days. The Church holds its breath.